This video offers techniques that I've learned by trial and error that have to do with making an efficient, very basic railing for those areas like this garden here, where it's just a utility path from time to time in a low priority area, and we're not doing any high-end landscaping to speak of. So the most cost-effective technique that I know of is using galvanized water pipe to form a single-side, relatively inconspicuous railing. And its pluses are long life, low maintenance, unlike wood, and also it's the fact that it's pretty inconspicuous. So the first technique, or I guess stage, is deciding on your lengths and how to set things up. And so on these first 4 sections, I've decided to bolt onto existing 4x4 posts. And you can see they have these little, they're called floor something. They're little circles with 4 bolts in them that pipe thread goes into. And then you've got, at my hardware stores, they only have 90s or 45s and couplers. So those are the things that I play with, along with T's. And it's greatly beneficial since, like me, you probably don't have a pipe threader, and if you do, it may not be very efficient. It's greatly beneficial to try and get the proper lengths of pipe for the space. And so on this job, I haven't had to cut any pipe and thus do any threading, which is great. But I have had to. You can see in a couple of areas I've needed to bend the pipe. Now that's much easier done with 3/4 inch pipe rather than 1 inch. So I made sure in the contract to schedule, to state 3/4 inch pipe. And this is my bending technique. Basically, I have a piece of 1.5 inch galvanized. I'll put something like this in, then I'll put another piece of galvanized over, and then with me putting all my weight, out about 2 to 3 feet from the pipe, and someone else standing on this large pipe if there's nothing to weight it down with, I can just bounce and bend the pipe as much as I want. And to get a more even curve, you of course just go along, because it starts bending right at this junction here. You bend it a little bit, move the pipe in, bend a little more, move it in, bend a little more, and you'll end up with a relatively even curve. And if you do it too much, you can unbend it a little bit. So that's the bending technique. Now when you go to a hardware store, you'll have a couple of different pipe to choose from. Now, this was a job I wanted to experiment with electrical conduit because it's 3 times cheaper. However, it's not as strong, and it also, my hardware store doesn't sell electrical conduit fittings in galvanized that has a slightly different thread. And so the first time that I threaded these in and put any pressure on them, when I was doing a little bending, the thread snapped right off. And so I switched back to water pipe. But that brings me to another thing, which is that buying 20-foot lengths is by far the cheapest way to go. A 10-foot length is pretty much the same price as a 20-foot length. And but one thing I did do for my verticals, where I don't need threads on both sides, for example, this post going in the ground and attaching on the top, the ground side doesn't need any threads. So I bought some 10-foot lengths and then cut them in half to make 2 5-foot lengths, and that brought the cost down by half, because it's about $23 for a 5-foot nipple, $29 for a 10-foot cut in half. So that's the basic idea, and then you've got some flexibility, you know, like for example how you could put a nipple in between here, but we've got, you know, it's nice to keep it as simple as possible. And so on this job, you know, I've just used the T and then a male female 90, and then what you do is you dig the hole first, so that you can set the 5-foot piece all the way in. You lift it up and thread it in so it can go up, and you do that last after you've kind of got the top rail such, you know, the way that you'd like it. And then there's one other little technique. When you get the 20-foot sections, they give you these style couplers, which are a little bit less rough on the fingers than this style coupler. So I use those couplers that I remove off the ends for a join on a railing like this. And then for an end, since you want the post to be vertical, you can come off a 90 this way, and then this one you can turn whichever way you'd like to, so that your verticals can in fact be vertical. And you know, this is the longest run, which is about you know, almost 10 feet. You know, that's perfectly all right. And one other thing, like on a curve like this, it can be nice to use a smaller section of pipe for a sharp curve so that you have room to pivot without it touching the ground, and then you can have longer sections that are a little straighter, because if you have like a 10 or 20 foot piece and put a 45 bend in it, you won't be able to, you know, turn it on, thread it onto the prior thread, because when it's going on the low side, it's going to dig into the ground and you won't be able to spin it. So that's, you know, just the, you know, just a couple of thoughts. And I like to kind of roughly tack things together before doing the final tightening and twist. And so I've tightened this section here, you know, up to right here. Then what I'm going to do is hold, unbolt, you know, these 3 floor mounts here, and spin the whole thing around a little bit tighter, and then bolt them back in a final time. One final thing about these, they come oiled, which is of course terrible for painting, and so it's a little bit of a tedious job to use acetone and a razor blade to get all the prices and little plastic markings off these pipes, and then you know, in doing so prepare them for painting. But I really like this Rust-Oleum thing. It's a primer and a paint all in one. I like that. And I like their little applier to keep your fingers you know, free of paint. And then you can just, you know, if you've got a situation like this, just holding a piece of plywood along the fence as you're painting will stop the overspray, along with a little bit of tape. So you know, those are just some general tips and techniques that I use when I install these. And the last step of all is pouring concrete in these holes. And there's a nice little technique that I've found. I happen to be about 300 yards from a concrete plant, you know, over in that direction. And the trucks come back with tailings about a third of the time. And I've asked the dispatcher to either load them into my 5-gallon bucket so I can pick them up and recycle concrete and help the environment and save about $60 on concrete for a little thing like this. And the other thing they do is they put the tailings into a big pit. And so I can go by most any time in the day with 5-gallon buckets, just slosh them into that pit, and as long as I don't need a specialty concrete, if it's just filler and binder for things like fence posts and stuff, I can just fill up 5-gallon buckets for free, help the environment, and it's even quicker than waiting in line and buying the concrete in the shop. So there's a little possibility if you happen to live near a cement yard.